Hello and welcome back to Identity Architects, the podcast that spotlights pioneers in our industry who are changing the way that data is used to drive more engaging data-driven experiences. I'm your host Ben Cicchetti, and for this special Women's History Month episode of Identity Architects, our senior customer success manager Norah Hannel had the opportunity to chat with Jessica Gottardo, head of commercial data product at Global, to discuss Global's approach to first-party data, female empowerment, women in tech, and much, much more. Before I hand it over to Norah and Jessica, just a reminder to hit that subscribe button so you know when the latest episodes of Identity Architects lands. But without any further delay, here's Norah's chat with Jessica.
Hi Jess, so pleased to be here with you today. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with me and have a good old-fashioned chinwag. I'm already a big fan of yours, but for anyone who doesn't know you, would you please give us an intro to who you are and what you do at Global, as well as an overview of the organization?
Hi, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. So I've been at Global for about a year and a half now. For anyone that doesn't know, Global is a publisher which covers audio, DAX, which is our digital ad exchange, and outdoor as well, so kind of a huge expanse. I'm the head of data product, which means that my team and myself look at how we can enhance and expand Global's product portfolio across all channels through innovation using both all kind of first, second and third party data sources with the view of being able to target, measure and report as effectively as possible. So my team kind of spearhead that, and we work alongside data strategy and other data teams such as data science in order to be able to really kind of push the projects and work streams through.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jess. And thanks for tuning in, lovely listener. To give you a brief overview of the format, we'll start with a round of quick-fire questions to get us warmed up before diving into more topical questions. So let's kick off with two of my favorite things, whimsy and nostalgia. Jess, do you have a favorite commercial from your childhood that stands out in your memory?
That's a really hard question. I think especially, going back 20 odd years, adverts were kind of, or commercials were more kind of central. You didn't have the streaming services like you do now, so you were kind of forced to watch them. I think a lot of the time commercials which are new, novel, probably just a bit annoying are the ones that you remember. So if you think of Go Compare or Compare the Market, or even like Howard in the Halifax ads, they're the ones that kind of really stand out, and you would find yourself singing their little kind of jingles for the rest of the day. I think about the Compare the Market ad, and I think I would love to have been in the room at the time where someone sat down and said, you know what market sounds a bit like? Meerkat. And what the response was in the rest of the room, I mean, surely people kind of thought, what are you talking about? But somewhere along the line, someone thought, that is a great idea, and we're going to really commercialize on it as well. So I think commercials that have that, like you said, whimsy, but also probably just like the slightly annoying feature to it.
Yeah, 100%. I think personifying the brand and having kind of instant recall tied to a silly or kind of eccentric mascot is quite a good way of putting yourself on the map of advertising in someone's memory. When did you first start working in the advertising space?
So it was probably around 6 years ago. I was working at John Lewis at the time and moved into financial services within John Lewis as the data strategy and planning lead. Shortly after I joined, there was a realization that GDPR was really fast approaching, and there wasn't a marketing strategy at that time around where we're going to repermission the whole base. What was the plan, essentially? I was quickly thrown into the middle of the CRM planning alongside John Lewis and Waitrose, and essentially looking at how we were going to repermission our whole base, which was no mean feat at all. So before this, I've been much more in the data analytics kind of pure space rather than advertising. But this really kind of threw me into it. And although it was incredibly stressful, a few months, very long days, very high kind of intense impact that we needed to kind of get it across the line, but with a really firm deadline. It did show how interesting it could be looking at the data in different ways to ensure that what we were sending out was kind of as relevant as possible, to make sure that the brand, whether it was John Lewis, Waitrose, or John Lewis Finance, which brand reached out to an individual to make sure that it was most impactful for them, to help drive that action, to help drive that reconsent, that sign in, sign up again. So from that point, I kind of didn't look back, and I've been in the advertising, kind of data-driven advertising space ever since.
That's amazing. So you were really on the forefront of data management and user privacy and how to target audiences with the right type of message quite early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really wasn't from I'm still not from a compliance background at all, but I soon became too much of a GDPR expert,
Mm.
and kind of go-to person around what we could and couldn't do in that space. And it was really looking at how could we look at the data and how could we look at engagement across the three brands to identify how we should be looking to kind of speak to customers and really kind of get their buy-in to reconsent.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's what makes you such a good thought leader in the space today as well. And do you think that your academic background in psychology helped with that kind of ideation process in terms of understanding the user and how best to meet them where they are from a business point of view?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to be perfectly honest, when I started in psychology, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to go into. I mean, it was a question as to whether I was even going to do psychology. For a good period of time, I was considering going into media, which may or may not be connected, however you look at it. But I really enjoyed it, and I did my undergrad in psychology, and then I did a postgrad in forensic psychology, to
Mhm.
really delve into it. And actually, my first job was in the police, so very kind of heavily linked to the forensic psychology space. Um, but I soon realised that what I really enjoyed was what drives the behaviour, what leads someone to do something, what leads a specific behaviour, what attitudes lead to the behaviour. And that's really transferable here, looking at how do we drive action off the back of a campaign. What are the levers that you can pull? What are the kind of behaviors that kind of drive interest or intent? How can you infer that off the back of understanding something? So what is it within a campaign that you can do that gets people to go to that website, that gets people to buy that product, and how do we make sure that we reach those people in the right moment? So again, I mean, currently, I guess there's a broad expanse of kind of campaigns that we're running at Global. But when I was working at John Lewis, we had insurance products there as well. So how did we know that that person needed insurance in that moment? Because talking to them halfway through their contract was really no good other than to keep us front of mind. So how did we make sure that we spoke to them in the right moment so that we were kind of front of mind and front of consideration, really?
Yep, 100%. That resonates with my personal career journey as well because I studied psychology and philosophy at
Oh,
uni
really?
and thought, "How do I apply this to the real world?" And advertising weirdly seemed like a good proxy for applying some of those concepts and ways of thinking um, to the real world. Looking back, on those past experiences, knowing what you know now, what would you have said to yourself when you first embarked on your career?
So as I said, like, I had really no idea what I wanted to go into when I was younger. Um, and even then, I would never have thought that I would have ended up in data. And like within psychology, you have to take a statistics module, and that was like by far my least favourite module that I had to take within psychology. Um, and to be honest, I kind of fell into my career. So I think I'd say like kind of not to worry about defining a clear path. I
Mhm,
think part of the aim within your first job or two should be to really start to understand and realize which parts of those jobs you enjoy, and also which parts you're good at. Like really harness what you're naturally good at and get better at it. And if you're not so good at it, yes, try to improve, but let's really focus on what you are good at and what you really enjoy. So I think that's kind of the trick, is not to worry or stress too much about um where you're going to end up, but more look at within kind of the job that you first start in, which parts do you enjoy and how can you kind of extrapolate those parts and find a job that really harnesses those areas. um, I think also it's that you don't know what you don't know. So
mhm.
a big part of data, I mean, I had no idea that data was a job at school at all. It was never mentioned to me, and I think if it had been, I would have thought it was very, number heavy and technical, and that's really not my background or my expertise. So I think it's really like increasing awareness of what's out there. Fully aware you cannot make everyone aware of every job that's out there, but I just think
Mhm,
really allowing children at that kind of secondary school, teenage years to really understand what their options are.
Yeah, I think those are amazing nuggets of wisdom, and allowing for some playfulness and intellectual curiosity to guide you to different kind of career experiences where you can over time hone the exact skill set or job that you're in, but you don't have to land in it immediately. It is kind of a process. So, given the job that you have landed in now, can you please share what is it you love about the role and about the industry?
Yeah, so I mean, firstly, it's really fast paced. It is moving so quickly, whether that's different methodologies that are being used, technology that's available, different approaches. Everything is moving and evolving so quickly. So, from GDPR through to the deprecation of cookies, you suddenly have to problem solve and think around issues and ways of working that we currently really rely on. So, in my role currently, my team work incredibly closely with data science. I'm very lucky that Global have an absolutely fantastic data science team. And we sit down and we think around how we can tackle, for example, being able to increase scale. And what are the methodologies that we can use that might be, or hopefully are, innovative and market leading. So with a wider group, for example, we sat down and we created DAX audiences, which makes non-addressable inventory targetable. And now we're thinking, with the deprecation of cookies, how can we really create a robust measurement solution? So how can we harness the power of first-party data? And how can we enrich what we've got and make it really powerful, which is where you guys at InfoSum come into it as well. But that's what I love, the thought of creating something new, thinking around a problem, because new problems are constantly arising, and really sitting down to thinking, right, well, this is how we've used data before, but what do we
Mhm.
have? What's in our arsenal, and how can we use it in a slightly different way to really harness the power of it? So being at the center of that kind of new thought process, and hopefully we'll be creating really successful, exciting products at the end of it that are kind of market leading, and actually kind of help answer that problem and that solution that kind of I feel like the industries are kind of, everyone in the
Yeah.
industry are kind of running after at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I think Global's an illustrious example of where you can get to by embracing a post-cookie world, and thinking about how having a new currency that is much closer to the user can actually enhance the experiences that they'll have in engaging with advertising. So, I agree. I think it's really exciting, feels very cutting edge, and also from kind of an ethical perspective is a nice way of rethinking marketing. If you could snap your fingers and change anything about that industry that we just said we love, what would it be?
Um, I think the ability to measure anything on any channel in full detail would be amazing. If I could literally snap my fingers and have my genie with my three wishes. I mean, Global has a huge outdoor business as well, as well as the audio side, and measuring the
Mhm.
effectiveness of outdoor is a real challenge. We do have ways and means of doing it, absolutely, but I would love there to be a way that we can absolutely categorically say these people have seen this frame, and therefore we can attribute this amount of the conversion to outdoor.
Mhm.
Again, with the deprecation of cookies, measuring audio is going to have to change and adapt for it. Again, something that we're looking at, and we're really confident that we're going to get a solution. However, if I could change one thing, it would be able to have all consents. Obviously, consent is at the front of everything, but all consents needed for everyone across all channels, to be able to really prove the effectiveness of campaigns.
Ah, yeah, what a great world that would be. But it does seem like you're, with the global player, for example, you are, making really good strides in how best to meet your users where they are in a first-party world. Is there anything when you reflect upon your day in the office that concerns you or that you feel frustrated by?
Um, I try not to look at it in a frustrated way. Problems always arise, and they will. I tend to reflect on the work that myself and my team have done in that day. I think it's so easy to focus on the negatives and the blockers or the barriers. And sometimes I think you've got to step back and realize I have an amazing team. They're made up of data visualization developers and data analysts. So at the end of the day or the week, just to sit back and see the amazing work they've done, there is so much going on at the moment. There is so much work happening, whether that's to do with targeting, how do we increase scale, looking at measurement, is that outdoor, is that DAX, is that audio, looking at how do we target more effectively, how do we create new audience segments, how do we report internally more effectively, how to create self-serve tools. There is so much going on. It's so easy just to get caught up in the whirlwind of just every
Mhm.
day. And at the end of the day or end of the week, I like just to step back and think, wow, we started that project a few weeks ago. Look how far it's come. And to really reflect on the successes. And obviously, you need to address the barriers and the frustrations to try to help speed them along. But I think a slight change of mindset around how can we focus in on all the successes and the brilliant work that's being done, and how can we supercharge that.
Definitely. And it sounds like that might also be what energizes you in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always been people. People energize me. And luckily, I'm working on some really interesting projects, which also energize me. To be fair, there's always a spectrum of work. But the fact that there are so many interesting projects going on at the moment, and as you said, even alongside that, working with fantastic people, a mixture of working with people who do give you that energy, but also working on the projects which help drive our offering forward. I think a combination of both make every day very exciting.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. Amazing. So, for the final question in our quick fire round, if your life had a theme song, what would it be?
I mean, that is such a tough question. It probably depends on the day of the week that you catch me in the mood I'm in, to be perfectly honest.
Everything, if you like.
But as I said, I mean, both in like my professional life and my home life, the people that you surround yourself with are those who kind of give you energy. So I think I will go for kind of "I'll Be There for You" by the Rembrandts, the Friends theme song,
Love it.
one of my favourite series anyway, and hopefully sums up me a little bit.
Love it. That's great. Thank you so much. And as promised, now we will pivot into diving a little bit more deeply into your career and viewpoints on industry topics. I'm also lucky enough to be sitting here with you today on International Women's History Month. So I'd love to celebrate your role in the industry as a leader, your achievements, and all the growth opportunities you seized along the way. Could we start with a scenic tour of your career, and if there is any common thread that connects your experiences, what that might be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say there are two main threads. One is data. Data has always been a common thread across all of my roles and my career as a whole. And the other is looking at how people act and what drives them. So my first job, as I mentioned earlier, was at the police, which was much more kind of qualitative data and looking at finding themes within the information that I had. All of the information was around people who'd committed crimes. So the part that I found really interesting was understanding what led a person to the point of committing that crime, essentially, and what was it that drove that behaviour. A bit of a 180. I then moved to John Lewis, so there wasn't not a massive common thread between the police and John Lewis, but I moved from one data role to another. So I was a data business analyst in my first role at John Lewis, so quite a big change. A lot of this was around moving systems, data governance, training sales teams on new systems and how to input the information on their side to ensure that we kept the data as clean as possible. So I moved into a secondment as a customer experience and insights analyst from that, and I became a social listening expert. Again, very data heavy, but really interesting to see how people act differently on different social media platforms. So, for example,
Mm.
people use Twitter more heavily to complain. Instagram was more around inspiration and around what they bought and what worked, what was great about their purchases from John Lewis. And Facebook was a bit of a middle ground. It was a bit of a blend between complaints and inspiration.
Sounds right.
Um, yeah, exactly. Um, I then moved into the financial services arm of the company as their data strategy and planning lead. So the first few months of this job were consumed by GDPR, like permissioning our whole base. It then moved into how we could harness the power of our data, and where we had opportunities to drive marketing effectiveness, as well as additional marketing signups post GDPR through marketing activity. So this role really emphasized to me the power of data and how we could use it to really kind of drive change. So by harnessing different and ranging data points within financial services, but also looking at how we could look at kind of cross partnerships, so John Lewis and Waitrose as well, we were able to drive kind of around a 6 times higher quote rate for insurance and just over a 2 times kind of higher conversion rate. So making really significant changes off the back of just looking at how we could use the data and drive that forward. So it really was this role that drove my interest in advertising and understanding the power of data within it. So after around 4 years at John Lewis, which is a company that I absolutely loved, I decided to try agency side, so really mixing it up again, and worked as a senior data strategist at Oliver, helping to build out their strategy function and specifically working on Adidas. So I was working very heavily on looking at test and learn approach within campaign creatives, which helped give an interesting view of, again, different data points, but also highlighting how different creatives have an impact on people's actions and what drives greater conversion. So a great example of this is when there's a sale on, there were 2 different types. One was just the sale price, and one was the original price with a line through it and the new price. And just by seeing that original price with a strike through and the new price drove much more conversion because people felt like they were getting a much better deal as opposed to just having the sale price. So it's really interesting little nuggets like that, which just shows that small little changes can really help drive behavior and engagement differently. So as I mentioned, I'm now at Global. I've been on the strategy side of data for around 5 years, and I thought moving over to product would really help kind of give me a rounded view of what I can kind of help drive forward essentially. So this job is very much around our ability to identify interests and intent and behaviours as well as attitudes to ensure that when we're targeting, we're reaching the right people at the right time, hopefully driving significant action off the back of it, and ultimately measuring the impact of what our channels are having to prove that that campaign is having the effect that we want it to have.
Amazing. It sounds like there are lots of different experiences where you were a key proponent of thinking user first and privacy first and data first. Out of those various experiences, what would you pick out as your biggest accomplishment?
It's really difficult to pick on one because also I'm not going to steal the limelight. I mean, as I've said, my team are amazing, and a lot of brilliant work has been done by them, as well as hopefully I've had an integral part of these work streams as well. But I would say even building those teams and seeing how kind of high functioning they are has been a massive accomplishment in itself, and also opening as a team lots of opportunities for ourselves and identifying where the gaps and opportunities are. So I would say that seeing the team getting on with their work to such a high standard, we've created a huge number of tools which allow for our internal teams to plan and target more effectively. We have innovation at the absolute core of everything that we do. We have a team mission statement, which we kind of all sat down and put on paper together. And it was really important to me that we did do that as a team so that we were all really bought into exactly what we stood for. And innovation was at the very core of it, that we all agreed as a product team, we want to innovate in this space. We want to drive forward new products, new tools, forward thinking essentially. So seeing the team thrive and get fantastic feedback from across the business and the industry is such great validation that what we're doing is the right thing, and we're kind of helping the business, our clients and the industry kind of move forward in that direction. I would say the second was around launching DAX audiences at Global. I mentioned it briefly earlier. This was a huge project with many stakeholders across the business where we were looking at the addressability issue. So especially so much of our listening comes from smart speakers, and not many people are logged in on smart speakers. So it's really difficult to be able to target them effectively. Working really closely with the data science team and looking at the audience segments which are most sought after and how we could increase our scale to make non-addressable inventory targetable. It was a long process with a huge amount of due diligence. We kind of had accreditation off the back of it and a very structured rollout process to ensure that nothing broke along the way and we were being able to achieve what we wanted to, with a lot of reporting alongside it. The process as a result has been we've been able to increase scale in some audiences of up to 700%. So a massive, massive uplift. Huge success. Yeah, it's been really great to see how successful it's been, not just internally, but being able to fill that demand as well is a massive success for us. So we are now looking at the next steps and what the next steps will look like, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about that in more detail soon, leaving you on a bit of a cliffhanger around what might be coming next.
We look forward to it. Kudos to you and to the entire team at Global. There are always hurdles on any journey. Can you talk a little bit about how you overcame some of yours?
So I think there's a few ways to look at it. I think from a professional standpoint, when you say you work in data, suddenly people get a bit scared of the word data, don't really understand what it means. They say that they aren't data people, whatever that means. So I think a big part of my data journey has been helping people who aren't kind of, in their words, data people, to realize that data is everything. Kind of information that sits around their job is still data. What they do on social media and the information that we can get from that is data. So it really kind of touches everyone in terms of their day-to-day life. It's not just numbers or coding or technical information. There's so much more to it than that. I think along the same lines is awareness of data. So it's often the case that the importance and significance of not just any data, but really good quality data can be overlooked, and historically by quite senior leaders. I think that is changing. It's not that they don't care about it, it's more just about there's a lack of knowledge around the area and data as an industry and the power that it really wields. I think this has become less prevalent in recent years, as in people are starting to realize how powerful data can be, especially good quality, clean, first party data, and what you can do with it. So I would say selling in the need to invest in this area, and to have data governance in place. There is no point having data if it is bad quality data.
Mhm.
What you put in, you get out. So if you put rubbish in, you're just going to get rubbish out. But I think it's really selling the importance of that to senior leaders, and really
Mhm.
around putting kind of time, money, and effort behind the ability to capture better first party data, and then how we can activate from it. Has been a hurdle, not just for me, but the industry. But I think we're kind of getting to the point now where people are starting to realize really what the time and investment that needs to happen into data.
Mhm.
I think in terms of how I approach them, it's really been around selling in the possible if investment was made in this area. What could we do with the data? How could we commercialize it? So really focusing in on the benefit back to the business, but also highlighting the risk if the investment isn't made, and the chance of falling behind the industry as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. I think bringing everybody along on the journey can be a challenge when you have stakeholders whose remits might not always overlap. But for something as critical in future proofing the industry as clean first party data, I think it's good to kind of evangelize what we're all doing across our entire organizations. And hopefully, platforms like InfoSum can help facilitate that process as well across different companies. Um, the industry is expansive, but can sometimes feel like a little village where everyone knows everyone. How has networking impacted your career?
So networking is a great way of meeting like-minded people. I think one of the main advantages to networking is realizing that everyone in the room, and in the industry are facing the same challenges and hurdles that you're facing. It really creates an air of everyone tackling the same issues together. It's also a really collaborative space where people see the industry as a whole, and want to progress it and move it forward. It's not, I'm not going to share something because I want to keep this for myself. It's really looking at how as an industry can we move forward and tackle the problems together. Um, so it's less about kind of what I'm doing, but more about what can we do. Um, I think looking at how we can collaborate and share more widely is how really the industry is going to move forward more effectively. I've met some incredible people through networking, which creates a community of people you can reach out to, for support or advice. I'd also say that, with it being Women's History Month, I've
Mhm.
recently gone to the Women in Data conference, which again was a fantastic place to network and meet other women in the industry, to share experiences, and the journey that we're all going on around being in a industry that is very underrepresented, for women, and how we can try to overcome that and balance out the scales slightly. So I think even if there's kind of a minority representation within an industry, networking really helps to expand your reach, finding like-minded people and looking at how to tackle the problem together.
Yeah, that's definitely one really important piece of the puzzle in moving towards a better and brighter future for generations to come. Are there any other solutions or ways of working that come to mind as to how we can help empower women in our industry or the world at large?
I think it's a really important question and one that isn't asked often enough. Um, I hadn't been to like a female data conference before, and when I did go to the Women in Data conference, it was so empowering and so just interesting. A lot of the information that came out of it was so interesting and eye opening. I think it's often the case still today that I'll be in meetings with data teams and I will be the only woman in the room, and that is
Mm-hmm.
really not rare at all. And I think a lot of this stems from a young age. As I mentioned earlier, when I was at school, I had absolutely no idea about the job that I'm in now, let alone the whole industry. It was never put forward to me as an option. I did go to an all-girls school. I have no idea if that was part of the reason why. That is not to say that my school did anything wrong. I went to a great school, but it just wasn't. It wasn't an option. It wasn't on the table. But you look at some areas which kind of touch closely to data, such as kind of IT or tech or maths. And again, they're all really male dominated industries.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a few things that need to be done to change this. The first is being able to reach girls at a young age to help break gender stereotypes. I still think there are plenty of stereotypes out there, and they think of data, or they think of maths, or they think of coding or technology or anything technical, and they think, oh well, boys do that, men do that. And I think there's an air of almost intimidation in it as well. Being the only woman in a room of men can be quite intimidating. And I think sometimes you feel like you need to speak louder or shout louder to be heard in that room. And that isn't the right approach. That is not how I work. That is not how I think a lot of my colleagues work. And it's really just adjusting what those norms look like. And I think it's not just explaining what the options are and within industries and what's possible. I think it's explaining that data aren't just numbers and it's not just a technical role. There's so much more to it. My role is not technical. There is so much more to data than zeros and ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there are initiatives out there looking into getting kind of girls at secondary school kind of understanding what the options are out there, but there is just so much more that can be done. I think there's a job for organisations to even out gender disparity in the industry as well. Only around 25% of people in data roles are women. So I think at the point where you're interviewing and you're getting data people in roles, yes, absolutely, let's try to even the scales and bring more women in. But I think it needs to start earlier than that, because I don't have data behind it, but I would be very surprised if more men didn't apply for those roles than women. So it's right, how do we get more women putting themselves forward
Mm-hmm.
for these roles, but also giving them the confidence just to go for it. Like, even if you don't think that you're quite there yet, just go for the role, have confidence in yourself, back yourself. I read an article once where it was saying that on a job description, women feel like they need to fulfill like 100%
I
of
remember this. Yeah.
the criteria to apply for it. And I think men feel the need to be able to fulfill 40% of it. And I read
Mm-hmm.
that and I was so outraged. I was so outraged that is how women kind of put themselves down, or how men put themselves up, however you want to look at it. That I thought, absolutely not. I am not going to be that statistic. And it
Mm-hmm.
was genuinely in that article that changed my whole mindset. And now every time I see a job, you never feel 100% of the criteria, because no one does. And if you do, you're too qualified for that job already at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Just go for it. You've got absolutely nothing to lose by just having that bit of confidence in yourself and putting yourself forward for that role, that opportunity, that challenge.
And it guarantees that you have opportunity to grow and learn. It's a good thing if there are still
Exactly.
some uncharted areas for you. But I agree. I've also been trying to adopt more of the lean in approach and almost go through the motions of saying yes before my brain can catch up and think twice about it. And looking back at your career, I also think it would be really helpful for our industry and peer industries, especially in STEM, to contextualize the different roles we have available for people in various majors. So for example, if you're interested in psychology, how does that come to bear in data or in advertising? It doesn't just have to be that you start also in computer science and then have, a linear path. I think it's nice to pick out connecting factors across subjects at school and then roles in the industry. For example, storytelling can be a really powerful skill to have, I think, in our industry, and that's one that could come from literature. So it's not always as black and white or obvious as meets the eye. And I agree with you, encouraging curiosity and just kind of going for it is key.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think actually you don't want everyone from the same technical
No,
background in your team, because you're just going to have one view, one set of skill sets, and suddenly you're going to have loads of work streams coming up, and no one has the right skill set to be able to answer those work streams. So in my team, I would want a vast range of technical ability, data literacy, storytelling ability, all of it. I want the whole range in there, because if everyone has got one skill set, we are not going to be a high achieving team.
yeah, not holistic. Couldn't agree more. Um, Another big topic for our industry is identity. Identity for targeting and measurement across devices and platforms, especially as we phase out third-party identifiers. Zooming out a little bit, how would you explain the term identity to a 10-year-old?
So I would say identity is who you are. It's all the little things that make you you. That's not just physical. You might have brown hair, you might have blue eyes, you might be tall, you might be short, but you're so much more than just all of those physical attributes. You have interests and you have hobbies. You behave in a certain way because of what you believe or what you've learnt. You have attitudes about things which drive your behavior and why you do things. And all of these different parts of you that make you you are shown in everything you do. So how you act in person to people, or how you behave on a website or social media platforms or apps, everything that makes you you comes across in those ways. So all of your devices, across all of them, across everything that you do, shows your interests and your behaviors and attitudes, and that all makes up your identity.
I think that's a lovely definition of identity. Um, Marketing revolves around consumer needs that touch on many of those points in terms of attitude, for example, and what drives us each to do the things that we do every day. What are some of the challenges your clients and partners face, maybe as well as global, in terms of marrying consumer needs and privacy?
Yeah, so this is one of my key focuses at the moment. So it's never been more clear that first party data is king. That is where all the power comes from. That is where you can really start to harness what you've got. With the deprecation of cookies, IDFAs, people being more aware of the data they're giving away and their consent, it's never been a more important time to review data strategies surrounding first party data, the breadth and quality and the opportunity that data partnerships have, and how you can harness and enrich first party data. So some of the challenges include the ability to target as effectively as possible with lessening consent and addressability, and also the ability to measure as effectively with the deprecation of cookies. So Global are focusing really heavily on both of these issues and looking to tackle them kind of as head on as we can. So firstly, on the ability to target effectively and with significant scale. So DAX audiences answers the scale piece, making non-addressable inventory targetable. And this is our first step around looking at scale. The second is how can then we harness our first party data. So we are absolutely looking at the data points that we hold internally. We have a huge breadth of listening data, of content, editorial content data. We have podcasts, gaming, audio articles. So we have a great breadth of listening data. But there are naturally gaps that we will never be able to fill with our current offering. So it's looking at what partnerships can we look at that will help to fill these gaps essentially. So InfoSum again is at the very center of what we have available to us and what we're doing. How can we be entirely compliant without sharing data, without personal information being that blocker, to understand the significant overlaps that we have with other first party data that from other companies, and looking from a second party perspective to build partnerships with them, to build and enrich what we have, to understand our audiences and our listeners more effectively, and to target as effectively as possible with scale as well. It's all very good being able to target effectively, but if that targeting has 2 people in it, it's not going to be particularly effective. So how can we look at, whilst keeping that scale, being able to bring in other partnerships, other companies, which is kind of a mutually beneficial kind of agreement between the two, and how can we really target off that? The other is really around measurement. So we have a few really exciting work streams at the moment looking at very robust measurement solutions in a cookieless world. We're looking to move to a testing phase. So, and we're really keen to be kind of incredibly collaborative with clients and partners and work alongside them to ensure the products we're creating really answer their needs directly. Again, there are some opportunities here where InfoSum will be critical around how do we look at, especially looking at kind of FMCG products, how can we look at using InfoSum to understand the uplift from an FMCG perspective off the back of a campaign. And there are partnerships that we're looking at how we can drive that forward as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And how can we as an industry ensure consumer trust is central to our business objectives, something that I think Global is doing an amazing job of already?
Yeah, so I mean, it's always kind of customer first in terms of what we're doing. We are in GDPR consent is at the forefront. I think it's around people are becoming much more savvy with their data, who they want to share it with and what's done with it essentially. So when it comes to that data, there's a fine line between using it for the desired use case that people would expect and then overstepping the mark and using too much of it or in a way that seems invasive. So ultimately, the customer should always come first in approach, in methodology and how their data is being used. Being transparent, and luckily we have a brilliant legal team that keeps us on the straight and narrow, and ensuring that all consents are captured and using data in accordance kind of with the right kind of regulations and legislations will make sure that consumers kind of keep or hopefully regain, if it's lost, some trust in kind of advertising and how we're using their personal information.
Brilliant. Thank you. And our final question to round out this lovely chat, in honor of Women's History Month, who has been a female mentor and role model for you, Jess?
I think a lot of women along my journey have been role models, especially because a huge proportion of my career has been in data. The women who have been the most inspirational don't feel like they need to play men at their game. They don't need to play by their rules. They play by their rules, they do it their way, and they do it really, really well. They trailblaze because they're just good at what they do. They don't need to prove a point. They don't need to show anything. They just get on and do it, and they do it fantastically. So despite having to probably work twice as hard to get there because they're a woman in a male industry, they just get on and they do it and they don't complain about it and they do such a good job that really their work speaks volumes. I recently heard Dame Stephanie Shelley talk, and she did exactly that. She paved the way for other women. She tried to give women all the opportunities and never allowed herself to be told that she can't. Mm-hmm. I'd like to think in years to come, I can follow the path that others who have motivated me have, and I can maybe inspire one woman to be confident in herself and not to back down in a man's industry. And if every woman in data can just do this for one other woman, then maybe we can start to even out representation within the industry.
Well, you've already inspired me today, and I'm sure many other listeners. Thank you so much for sitting down with me, Jess. And thanks everybody who tuned in.
Thanks so much.
Thanks again to Jessica for joining us on Identity Architects. What a fascinating discussion. It was great to hear about Jessica's journey in data and how Global is prioritizing consumer privacy and the rise of first-party data. All that leaves for me to do is to remind you to hit that subscribe button so you know when the next episode of Identity Architects lands. But until then, thanks for listening.